One, two, one, two. How are y'all doing today? Yeah, man. We're going to go into a little bit about belief again. But this time, why do people believe that the Bible has anything to do with God? So that's what we're going to explore today. And we're going to get right into it. And I'll share my thoughts. So let's go. Yeah, man. How are you doing on this glorious day? I'm doing good myself. We're here back with me, myself, and I, Scott, with the Mirror Point, where reality checks itself, going over a few thoughts about belief and what the fuck does the Bible have to do with God? Does anybody know that? Because it seems like a lot of Christians and Orthodox Jews and Jehovah's Witnesses and even Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, all kinds of different denominations, fundamentalists, evangelical Christians, never really asked that question. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of a given. The Bible even starts with, in the beginning, God. So today I wanted to challenge that belief that most Christians inherit without ever really questioning it at all, right? So that's the belief that the Bible was written by God. You know, whether they say it was inspired, not metaphorically, literally written by God or dictated to men by God, right? When I was a Christian, I never questioned it. It's just always the beginning assumption, you know, in so many ways. But when we step back and ask a few basic historical questions, for me, cracks appear immediately, right? They appear immediately. And do we have any Christians out there? Do we have any Christians that believe the Bible is the word of God? The word of God. Does anybody really believe that? If you do, you're more than welcome to share the stage with me and we can discuss it in a very peaceful way, in a very upbuilding way. I put the the link in the live chat and it's here on the screen. So if you want to jump in and participate, maybe educate me on a few things, you're more than free to do so. I think it's a very curious thing. You know, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But who wrote that sentence? Who was observing the creation sequence? Where was the stenographer? Where was the CNN live feed on that? The answer, of course, is that there wasn't one. Genesis didn't appear until much, much later, according to the Bible itself. It was compiled from oral traditions, myths, Babylonian cosmology, and what are priestly editors. Yet billions over time in history are taught to treat it as eyewitness testimony. Right? But how can you treat it as eyewitness testimony when it isn't even presented that way? We're just supposed to take it for granted or take it for the gospel truth. Christians are really told that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. the Pentateuch. But again, Moses wasn't there during creation, right? He wasn't there during Noah's flood or Abraham's life or Joseph's story. These are centuries before his time, according to the book. So it just begs the question. Now, a lot of people assume that it was a vision from God and inspired from God and all of that. But you know what's even more ironic? What really gets me is that Moses supposedly writes about his own death and burial. How does that happen? Deuteronomy 34, 5 through 6, or verse 5, or something like that, says, so Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there and buried him. And it says that no one knows the place of his burial up to the time of that writing. Right? How did he write that if Moses wrote that shit? Christians, you have, if you're really interested in truth, these are the things you need to ask, not just assume it's the case. The same with Jews and Muslims. If they're really interested in truth, why do you just assume that Moses actually wrote about his death and burial? How do you write after you die about people not knowing where you were buried? How does that happen? Unless Moses had a ghostwriter, literally, right? No, man. And the Bible also reports about private conversations between God and Moses, like in Exodus 33. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And same with Jesus. Like, remember in Matthew chapter 4 describes Jesus' confrontation with Satan in the wilderness, where it says he was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Nobody else was there. So who really documented the dialogue? Did Satan bring a court reporter with him? Did Jesus himself dictate it later, word for word? Christians, you never stop to ask these sort of questions. I know I didn't when I was a Christian until later on, when I started realizing that I had no real good reasons to believe this bullshit. Sorry, I'm just waking up. Cheers. And believe me, I'm not against the idea of God at all. I'm really not. I'm like a reluctant atheist, honestly. But you know what? I've learned not to be so much. I've learned to sort of detach from beliefs, and it's really helped the my evolution as a person and growth over time. There really is a freedom with detachment from beliefs, from this neediness of having some fucking father figure in heaven, especially if you're talking about the biblical God, because that's a God that I kind of wouldn't want to be real when you think about how this God operates ethically. Right? So what does the Bible really have to do with God? Let me ask an even more basic question. Who was writing the life of Noah as it happened? Like, Genesis gives dimensions of the ark, the time of the flood, and even God's thoughts. But there's no narrator, no witnesses, no notebook at all. There was no ancient MSNBC on site, no Fox News hovering above the flood with a helicopter camera saying, day 39 updates at 6, guys. Tune in. No. It's all just mythology, not journalism, okay? It's just assumed that it's about God. And you're just supposed to take it on faith. You're supposed to believe that this shit actually happened, which really, if you're an intelligent person, it's kind of an insult to your intelligence. When you don't ask those questions, you're sort of disrespecting yourself. You know, you're letting someone else talk you into not questioning stuff. That's bullshit. And like the resurrection, who saw what? Christians claim that the resurrection of Jesus is like the most important event in human history, right? But ask yourself, who actually witnessed the resurrection? I mean, even according to the book, the answer is no one did. The tomb, if you remember the story, the tomb is found empty, but no gospel describes the moment of resurrection itself. It's sort of inferred, not witnessed at all. But then, you know, we have 1 Corinthians 15, which it claims that Jesus appeared to people after the rising, but that is hearsay written by the Apostle Paul, who never met Jesus during his life at all. He met a hallucination, a vision, or a voice, or however you want to describe it. The Gospels were written decades later by anonymous authors in Greek, mind you, not by the disciples, and not even in Aramaic, which is probably the most common language of the time that Jesus probably spoke. People who could read and write in Greek were educated people, not the disciples who were described as fishermen and lowly people. Jesus himself was probably like a brick mason, because that was the most popular form of construction back in the first century. So he wasn't very educated. He didn't write shit, right? So it's just very interesting how people just assume all of this stuff must be real. And like, what about the story of Job? Look at the book of Job. Job wasn't in heaven when God and Satan made a wager over his life. Job chapter 1 verse 12 says, the Lord said to Satan, everything he has is in your power. So who really heard that? Who transcribed that heavenly board meeting back then? Who wrote the dialogue between God and Satan? The answer is, it's a literary drama. It's not a documentary. And it was a wager. God was betting, playing with somebody's life, giving Satan the power to do whatever he wanted to do. And even God killed people in that story. Which leads us into other things like the ethics of this God, Yahweh, right? Now, Christians will tell you that God is love. And the scripture says that too, that God is love. But the biblical God behaves more like a warlord than some sort of example of morality, if you ask my opinion. I mean, because it does the New Testament, I think Paul describes what love is: patient, long suffering, peaceful, all of this kind of stuff. But that's not the biblical morals or ethics of God, is it? Like, let's look at the murder of infants. 1 Samuel 15. Didn't God command Saul, do not spare them, put to death men and women, children and infants? In Hosea, God declares, their infants shall be dashed in pieces, and their pregnant women ripped open. Not very loving, if you ask me. Psalm 137, verse 9 says, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. This is infanticide as religious policy. Christians would actually call this evil in any other nation if they did it, or in any other context if it didn't have to do with their God, wouldn't they? That's the really sick thing about it. But they don't question this. They just assume this book is about God. This book is the inspired word of God. You know, even the Bible repeatedly punishes entire populations for the sins of individuals. For example, Achan's sin in Joshua 7. When he disobeys God's, what's God's response according to Joshua 7:24? And all Israel will stone him with stones. They burn them with fire. Not just Achan, his sons, daughters, his animals, all killed for one man's action. Modern justice defines justice as when the guilty are punished and the innocent are protected. But the biblical God seems to flip that on its head. Now, is this morality? Let's be clear. If murder is wrong, then ordering murder is wrong. If infanticide is wrong, then commanding infanticide is wrong, right? If collective punishment is unjust, then commanding it is unjust. Now, Christians try to escape this by redefining morality so that whatever God does becomes good by definition, because God is good and good is God. That's not morality, though. That's dictatorship with worship. You know what I mean? There's nothing ethical about that, in my opinion. And it's contrary to the Bible itself. God is the biggest hypocrite. Now, we come back to that one simple question, though. Why should anyone believe ancient books just because they're old or considered holy? You know, that's a logical fallacy. It's called the appeal to antiquity fallacy. People believe the Bible is true because it's old, it's considered sacred, and other people believe it. You know, all those billions of people can't be wrong, right? But not because it holds up to scrutiny, evidence, eyewitness reliability, or moral consistency. Oh, no. No. If the Bible were written today, claiming private conversations with God, Satan, and angels, dictating cosmology about evidence and celebrating infanticide, it wouldn't be revered. It'd be canceled. It would be dismissed as fan fiction. You know what I'm saying? That's all it really is. Now, back in those days, it was just assumed because that's how the culture was. And it's even debatable whether these sort of stories were even to be taken literally. But even still, it presents God as a very immoral monster and contradictory to his own principles. And then think about the laws. Think about the laws that say you should stone a woman if she doesn't bleed on her marriage night. When you go into her and she doesn't bleed, you can present the bed sheet, to the elders. And if there's no blood on it, kill her. Is that ethical? Especially in light of the fact that not every virgin bleeds on her first night. That's just a scientific fact. So that's just kind of crazy. You know what I mean? That's not ethical. That's not moral. And these are the things that really cause me problem. What about slavery? Slavery in the Bible. I know a lot of Christians will say, oh, well, that was indentured slavery. Right? It was the culture of the time, so God had to meet people with where they are at as God reveals himself over time. That's just bullshit. That's just a cop-out. Number one, you could get your slaves from the nations around you. And you could sell them off and their children indefinitely to your kids as an inheritance. This is the ethics of this Bible God. Not very ethical in my view. And it's just really crazy. I mean, Christians still, though, they insist the Bible is the word of God, spoken by God, dictated by their God, perfect, inspired, and historically accurate. But if you actually read the shit like a thinking adult instead of a frightened worshiper, you'll realize something very, very simple. The Bible was not written by God. It was written by humans who weren't even present for the events they supposedly describe. Not one fucking sentence in Genesis begins with, here's what I personally saw when the universe was created. No, because nobody was there. Nobody was there. So you can't claim it's true. It's just your belief. Genesis is not eyewitness testimony. Like I said, it opens with, in the beginning, God created. Awesome. Who wrote that? Who watched that? Who stood there outside of time scribbling notes as God formed galaxies and stuff? No one. There was no biblical cameraman floating in the void. No stenographer at the creation of light on day one. No journalist interviewing Adam and Eve about how ribs taste when converted into wives. The oldest copies of Genesis come from ancient scribes writing centuries later, drawing on older Mesopotamian myths like the Enuma Elish. Yet modern Christians swear it's literally true, all of it. And they don't want to hear anything different than that. They're very emotionally committed because they've been brainwashed. They've been brainwashed. They don't want to think for themselves. They don't want to test anything out to know if it's true. They have no standards of what counts as good evidence. They have belief. Moses wasn't alive for creation. He wasn't alive for Noah. He wasn't alive for Abraham or Joseph. He could not have written eyewitness accounts of events century before he existed. That's just crazy. And it gets funnier. You know, like when he talks about, so Moses, the servant of the Lord, died and he buried him. Moses was 120 years old when he died. How do you write about your own death and burial? Did Moses crawl out of his fucking grave to finish the draft? Is that what we're supposed to believe? And Christians somehow read this with a straight fucking face. And let's talk about scenes where only one character is present. For example, God talking to Moses on Mount Sinai, Satan talking to Jesus in the wilderness, God talking to Adam and Eve in Eden, or talking to Adam really in Eden, Satan talking to Eve, God negotiating with Noah, Satan bargaining with God over Job. Who wrote all this stuff? What about Jesus versus Satan in the wilderness? Then Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan." Who heard that? Who documented it? Did Satan submit the transcript to Matthew or something? You know, also Job records a heavenly poker match, right? Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power." Who was up in heaven taking minutes? Who was there with a notebook watching God bet with Satan over a man's life? Job wasn't there. Nobody was. These are literary devices. They're not history, folks. And like I said, the resurrection that nobody saw. Christians claim the resurrection is the most important event in history, but here's the part they never say out loud. Nobody saw Jesus rise at all. There's no scripture describing the resurrection event itself, only empty tomb narratives and hearsay. He is not here. He has risen, it says in Matthew 28. That's not evidence. That's an after the fact claim. 1 Corinthians 15 is going to list you out appearances, but every single one is reported decades later by Paul, who never met Jesus while Jesus was alive. That's like writing a biography of George Washington just based on the rumors that you heard in a bar somewhere. The same shit. You know, Christians, again, they say God is love. Let's read what love meant to Yahweh. 1 Samuel 15:3. Now go and strike Amalek. Do not spare them, but kill men, women, children, and infants. Hosea 13:16. Their infants shall be dashed to pieces and their pregnant women ripped apart. Numbers 31:17 through 18. Now kill every man among the little ones, but keep alive for yourself all the young girls. All right. God is kind of freaky and sick. This isn't metaphor, man. This is explicit, targeted violence commanded by God, right? If a modern general in today's world gave these commands, he'd be tried at The Hague for war crimes, right? You know, we talked about collective punishment. You know, Deuteronomy 23, no one born of a forbidden union may enter the assembly of God, even to the 10th generation. Joshua 7, you know, they took Achan and his sons and daughters, and all Israel stoned them with stones. This isn't moral. This is barbaric, folks. And meanwhile, modern justice is built on the opposite principle. The guilty are punished and the innocent are protected. The Bible simply reverses that shit, right? You know, a lot of divine massacres, you know, Genesis 7, a global flood kills everything that breathes. Exodus 12, Egypt's firstborn killed, all the firstborn sons, that is. 24,000 Hebrews killed by a plague in Numbers. 70,000 Israelites killed for David's census in 2 Samuel 24. Soldiers who merely drank water improperly were killed. Judges chapter 7, 5 through 7, I think it is. That's not love, guys. This is brutality. If Christians saw any other religions describing this shit from a deity, they would call it demonic, wouldn't they? You know, oh no, but it's true because it's old. It's because it's ancient and holy. You know, the appeal to antiquity fallacy. Old does not equal true. People used to believe that diseases came from demons, women were property, the sun revolved around the earth, slavery was ordained by God, leprosy was a punishment for sin, lobotomies cured depression. People believed all kinds of crazy shit in the old days because they didn't know any better. Age does not grant authority, guys. If a man today claimed private conversations with God, commanded genocides, killed infants, flooded the world, and dictated, you know, some sort of origin story that didn't make any sense with zero witnesses, anybody would call him insane, Christian or not. But put the same those same sort of stories or claims in an old parchment, and suddenly it's holy. It's revelation. The Bible was not written by God. It was dictated by priests or scribes. It wasn't eyewitness testimony to creation, resurrection, or heavenly board meetings between God and his angels. It was written by ancient humans with pens, parchments, myths, agendas, political agendas, worldviews shaped by ignorance and tribalism, and borrowing myths from other cultures nearby that they traded with. Those are the most likely explanations for that. To call it the Word of God is not an act of scholarship, but an act of fear and tradition and attachment to beliefs. Beliefs don't become true because they're comfortable or ancient or culturally enforced. They become true when they match reality, and the Bible doesn't do that, does it? It's just a lot of myths. Hey, Phyllis Sober, glad to see you here. Thank you, man. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so you know, we live in the 21st century. I mean, you would think we would have evolved, you know, psychologically and spiritually and morally and ethically and all of that, especially the fact that we have so much history behind us and a proven track record about these religions and what it causes people and causes the world. But, you know, that goes to show you something about human nature. Humans, we love comfort. It's hard for the mind to get out of its comfort zone. And believe me, the mind is limited. The limited mind, its whole work is to deceive itself for fitness payoffs in nature. That's what it does. That's literally what it does. That's why you can't really trust, you know, your feelings and your emotions to guide you to make good decisions or to pronounce what truths are. You know, that's why we have science. Science uses tools to transcend these limitations, like through mathematics. We have philosophy, where we try to transcend these feelings and belief by using logic and frameworks and rules that we can agree on. Now, I don't think that we have access to objective reality as it really is. I don't think we really do. I think we make the best estimation. You know, all we can really do is we can make predictions about how the world behaves around us, right? And when we see certain patterns in law-like behavior, we can predict, with some accuracy. This is how we get, rockets to Mars and stuff like that. This is how we can predict, the next solar eclipse, or, things like that. We infer a lot of things, and we go off the laws and regularities, the patterns. We're pattern seekers. But even that isn't necessarily access to the absolute metaphysical truth. Neither is reading old books and going off what old ancient people told us. The only thing we really know is that we're in this life having an experience, that we're conscious beings. That's the only thing we really know. That's what we know. If there's anything you can say, it's the fact that you're having an experience of existing. For me, that's the baseline of my epistemology. The rest is an inference. And those inferences have proven historically to be uncertain, because we're always learning. We're always learning things. So it's good to take life with a little bit of humility. Right? And I think that's why I respect the enterprise of science and philosophy and things like that. It isn't about finding capital T truth. It's about questioning basic assumptions all the time, especially when new evidence is presented. I don't think we're ever really going to truly know everything, because every framework rests on at least one assumption. And even if you could prove that assumption, now you have to prove why that assumption is true. And so you create another framework, which is based on another assumption. Was it Gödel's theorem? It's like a mathematical proof that, it's almost like an infinity of things that you would have to really learn, and you'll never get there. You know what I'm saying? It's really kind of impossible to get absolute truth, a theory of everything, right? At least now it is. Hopefully one day we can get there. But this gets into philosophy. This is metaphysics, philosophy, stuff that's outside of observable physics, because we don't know everything. We don't see everything. We're not omniscient. We do the best we can, and we approach this stuff with humility. But I don't think religion is really about truth in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, it's about comfort. It's about attachments. It's about fitting into your culture, following orders. It's about fear, being afraid of some imaginary dictator in the sky that's going to burn you in hell and fuck you up in the afterlife if you don't. That's what a lot of these religions are about. Not all of them, but a lot of people are like that. And a lot of people, they just need something to believe in. They need some sort of anchor in their life, because they're not secure in not knowing. It's hard for them to say, I don't know answers to these questions. But when you finally become at peace with not knowing, you know, the world opens up to you. Then you can actually search for answers. You can actually, respect your own experience, and you can understand that in your experience, you're going to figure out really quick that you don't know every goddamn thing, and this provides you with a little more humility. And I think that's a very virtuous thing. Being dogmatic is not virtuous. It's misleading. You know what I'm saying? And it's really sad to see the outcome of how a lot of these preachers will exploit people's fears and hopes and dreams and stuff like that so that they can enrich themselves. Recently we had these end of the world doomsday predictions where people sold all of their belongings, and in some cases they gave their kids over to different people and stuff. Really sad, crazy shit, man, all based on a book, or all based on what someone told them how to interpret that book, as if it has anything to do with God. No, it had everything to do with somebody exploiting you. And it goes on and on and on. They continue and they browbeat you, and they come up with all these little mind tricks and arguments to kind of like fool you and confuse you, like try to entrap you in some sort of internal contradiction with yourself. Like I've done a lot of videos like that too. And a lot of these preachers are what you call the presuppositionalists. They're like, well, they'll gaslight you. They'll say, well, who are you to question if it wasn't for God existing? You couldn't do any logic or questioning or any of that, because you have to have God in order to do any of that to get off the ground. How do you bootstrap yourself? You have to have God. And God has revealed himself naturally and through revelation, the Bible. Right? So again, they point to that book as special revelation. Hey, it's the biggest religion in the world. It's the top selling book throughout history, the Bible. How do you explain it if not God? If it wasn't for God, people could do anything they want. They would go out and kill and murder and, great people. If it wasn't for the Bible, there would be no morality without the Bible. You borrow your morality from the Bible. This country was founded on the Bible. As if it has anything to do with God at all. Yeah, our culture was, based in large part on puritanical virtues and stuff like that. I agree, but that's also why this country's been fucked up. We also did slavery, didn't we? We also kept women from voting and having the same rights as men. And we still do a lot of fucked up shit in this country. And you really want to take credit for that with your religion and your Bible? But yeah, they do. Because they like the status quo. They like the way things are, And it's a really testament to the power of these bullshit religions and the weakness of the mind, of the human mind, to really be critical, to be skeptical a little bit, to question things and respect your mind, respect yourself. You know what I mean? It's really sad. And I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever really change. I know we need a philosophy that can replace it. And I think the best thing we need to do is we need to become stronger people. We need to detach from being so needy for believing shit. We don't need to believe in comic books. Comic books are for entertainment and fun and little moral stories and reinforcing little current cultural ethics or whatever. But we don't need that shit to operate and to feel complete. You know, there is no Jesus side hole in your heart when you leave that shit. There really isn't. Now, there could be for some people a need to believe, but that's because they need to get rid of the need to need. And that's where, you know, we need a better outlook on life, a better perspective, and we need a better practice. We can replace that needy religious mentality with empowerment by empowering yourself. And also seeing the same power in each other. If we can see the divinity in each other, and when I say divinity, I mean our ability as humans to transcend our limited minds full of fears and stagnation and beliefs. That's what I mean by divinity. We have that capability of transcendence, of changing. And it comes about, in my opinion and in my experience, through acquainting yourself with positive people, positive things, and constantly reinforcing that and getting away from negative shit, staying away from things that don't serve you, limiting beliefs, and, you know, developing your own confidence and your own power and self-sufficiency. You know, and understanding that you are a sacred being to yourself. And you can see the same in others. And together we can create a whole better, much better world based on rationality, humanitarianism, and not fear. You know, get rid of the fear. But we live in such a fear-based society, such a crazy world, you know, and it's because we put our attention to that. You know, what you put your attention to, your focus on, becomes your perceptual reality. This is why some people, when they walk out their door, they see a colorful, beautiful world and they say hey to everyone. They have a great experience. And other people, they see nothing but doom and gloom. They see nothing but the problems of the world because that's what they focus on. It's kind of like when you're looking, or you bought a car, or you're looking for a certain car or item or some shit, all of a sudden you see it everywhere. It's because it's been your focus, it's your attention that you put to it. And so you see it, you project it into the world. So you start to see all these things. You know, people who give in to numerology, like, you know, the number 11, something like that. They see that shit every time they look at clocks. They notice that because they only record the hits and never the misses, because that's what they focus on. That's where their attention is at. But this can be a source of empowerment if you really think about it. If you really want to change your life, you know, stop focusing on bullshit and limitations and limiting beliefs and start focusing on positive things. You know, get out of your comfort zone of being, you know, involved in this outrage culture where you're doom scrolling and you're seeing all the bad news and social media and on the news and everything else. And try to take a break from that shit, man, and focus on better things. Focus on more positive things, positive information. Go out and do some nice shit with people and for yourself. Show yourself some love and respect. You know, check in with yourself. Respect yourself. Part of it is being skeptical of bullshit, because there's a lot of bullshit out here too. You don't want to focus on that shit. And if it does cross your path, you want to have the tools available to know the difference between bullshit and positivity and truth. And that comes from being skeptical. And skeptical comes from respecting yourself, respecting your own mind. You have to, but you also have to be aware that your mind is limited, and it's very easy for you, just like it is for anyone else, to fall for the bullshit. It takes a lot of practice. It takes skill. It takes attention to learning about logic, learning about fallacies, learning about how easily we are fooled by things. And it takes practice to not be impulsive, to be given into your fears and anxieties. I suffer from a lot of anxiety in my daily life. This is part of the reason I do what I do, because it sort of keeps me on track and it keeps me focused on something hopefully positive, and some way that I can have an outlet to share things that I've learned and reminding myself. That's what keeps me out of trouble, man. And I appreciate all you guys spending time with me and checking my channel out and participating and all of that good stuff, man. It means a lot. And I think I want to be a positive motivation for people. So when I'm talking about religions and Bibles, it isn't to put people down or to own people or to make people feel stupid or look stupid, but just to kind of like put a pebble in your shoe, give you something to think about, because I've been there and I want to use my experience to maybe help and upbuild people in some kind of way. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of bullshit out here. And it's been going on for a long time in human history. And we have to recognize that just because these books are old, and just because a lot of people believe them, and because, it threatens you with, spiritual violence at the end of your life and in the afterlife, that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it true. All that shit is just to gaslight you. It's all just peer pressure from dead people, man. That's all it is. Peer pressure from dead folks. They've been long gone. Thousands of years. If you read these books and you can get some of the positive things, Jesus said some positive things, some good things, but a lot of people ignore that part. And they just go into the condemnation part. People are into feeling superior. People are motivated by their feelings to feel above another person. And also they want to feel like they're helping the world too. And some people honestly are scared. And so out of love, they want to prevent you from going to hell and all of this kind of garbage. But, it's good to point it out to these people. And this is why I do what I do here in my hobby, in my spare time, to help people that may be on the fence or may be questioning a lot of that shit, why they should move away from it and put more power into themselves and empower themselves. Right? You can find beauty and awe and magic in the world as it is. You don't need a comic book or anything like that. We live in a very mysterious universe. We live in a very awesome world too. There's a lot of fucked up shit, but a lot of that fucked up shit comes from religion. A lot of it comes from other people. You know what I mean? People that are influenced by bullshit, dogmas and stuff. And we can make the world at least a little bit better by letting go of these non-serving beliefs and limited beliefs. And listening to people that are just out to exploit you, because that's all they have. These are very weak people, weak-minded people that couldn't find another way in life but to come up off of somebody else's fears. This is unethical behavior, in my opinion. I don't think it's very productive for the world. And it's a very empty, um, shallow life to live, a lie, to have to lie to people to make your living. You know, you're just a weak person to do shit like that. I mean, I could have easily went to school, to seminary school. I could have became a preacher. I was thinking about it at one point, but then I only thought about it for a second. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go out here and lie to people to make money. So many different ways you can make a living. There's so many different things you can do with your life that would be so much more positive and helpful and meaningful than to lie to people and exploit people's fears. But that's what these motherfuckers do. They go out here and they get this little degree or this little title as doctor, reverend, pastor, such and such, so that they can get followers in a church, so that they can lie to people, so they can get money and power and prestige. And a lot of people get into politics and do some of the same bullshit. And that's how they live their little short life, doing that shit. You've got 80 years or so on this world, and that's what you want to do. You want to do that kind of shit. And believe me, having all the money, having all the titles, that shit doesn't lead to happiness. That shit goes away. That shit doesn't mean anything when hard times hit your life. And hard times isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Everybody's going to need that. And then the ego is not going to be there to help you. Your ego is not going to be there to save you. All your followers and people can abandon you in your times of need because it's all based on the wrong type of shit. People that like you only because of your money, your fame, your titles. What happens when all that stuff goes away? Say some tragedy happens. Where are they going to be? Most likely nowhere. Most likely, you're going to be by yourself. And you're going to know that your God is fake because you already knew it was bullshit. And you've got to live with that. You've got to live with that. Now, some people do. I'm just not one of those kind of people. And I really don't think that most people are that way. I think most human beings are empathetic. It's the reason we're still around on this earth today as a species, because we know how to cooperate for the most part. It's just that we, unfortunately, we come with a lot of bullshit too. But we could get better. We can thrive if we just learn. If we can ever just fucking learn, man, that it's about empowering one another, not holding on to superstition and fear-based beliefs. That's not what's going to help us evolve as a people, man. But yeah. So that's what it is. If anybody wants to come on stage, I got a few minutes, man. We can talk about it. I've got the link up here. Feel free to call in. Because like I said, these books, they have nothing to do with God as far as I see it. I don't think they do. This God you worship is unethical. He's a hypocrite. He kills everything that breathes in Genesis. He killed all the Egyptian firstborns. He killed 24,000 Hebrews by plague in Numbers 25. He punishes people generationally for the acts of one person. 70,000 Israelites were killed for David's census back in 2 Samuel 24. There's a lot of bullshit in the Bible, man. Infanticide, collective punishment. And this is the God you believe. Nobody was there when he talked about, the bet with Job. When he created the heavens and the earth, who was there? When Jesus was tempted by Satan, Where was CNN Live at? Where was MSNBC? Who recorded that shit? How did Moses write about his own death and burial? Like, there's so much giveaway. Who recorded Noah's story? Who was there, seeing the negotiation with God and Noah and all of this kind of stuff? It's really just childish, if you ask me. It's childish bullshit. Childish bullshit. And these people are so scared. So scared. Now you've got all these monks marching for peace throughout the United States right now. And you've got all these Christians out there shouting them down with bullhorns and shit because of fear, because they're not getting the attention. In other words, Satan and his false religion is getting the attention that they deserve. How dare they? They don't believe the same comic book stories we do. They think they can find peace without my God. It's bullshit, man. It's just crazy shit. I'm telling you, we as a people, we have to evolve. We're going to have to learn to get over this stuff. And so please, man, like and subscribe to my channel. Like and subscribe so we can spread the word, man. Come on board. Let's talk. Every Saturday we have interactive conversations about this stuff. And I present a new philosophy, non-dualism. We talk about non-dualism or idealism, what it really means to be a mystic, to be spiritual. What does this really mean, in my opinion and in my viewpoint, in my worldview? And I'm with, my girl, Sophia. She's my co-host, and we talk about this stuff. We have a really good time. Taurus Necros Productions. I haven't seen you in a while. Hello, sir. How you doing? I'm one of the few Catholics that knows the content of the Bible in English. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I don't know how long you've been here, but I've been talking about, what does God have to really do with the Bible? You know what I mean? Yes, I was gone for like 3 months. Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw some of your videos, I think. What did y'all talk about? I just showed up. Yeah, so I'm just talking about why should we think that God has anything to do with the Bible, right? So, just to kind of give you a rundown of what I was talking about, like Genesis is not eyewitness testimony. Like Genesis opens up with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, right? But who wrote that? Who watched that? Who stood there outside of time making notes as God formed the galaxies? No one was really there. There was no biblical cameraman floating in the void, right? No stenographer, no journalist interviewing Adam about how ribs taste when converted into wives, right? Moses wasn't alive for creation. Moses wasn't alive for Noah or Abraham or Joseph. So that's just one example. Yeah, jump on in, man. Yeah, in my opinion, I don't think it's so. I think that even the Bible says as much because, Moses didn't come on the scene until after, obviously, from creation, right? Nathaniel, how you doing, sir? Glad you could join me. How are you doing? I can't hear you, though. You're not coming through. There you go.
Am I coming through now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry to show up an hour in. I actually, I pulled up your stream a little while ago, and I've been on YouTube a lot this morning, actually. You're like the third thing I've done, but I had to do some business, and then the children went crazy, so I came late to the party. So, well,
Right.
so you're saying, okay, so you were saying the Bible. I'll tell you my, because I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, in fact, the church fathers would agree with you, and as far as the fact that Moses wasn't, I mean, if he was an eyewitness, it would have been like a mystical vision or something like that, which is plausible. I mean, here he is on the mountain. There's all these crazy things going on. That's when you would, But this is actually one area where I probably disagree with the church fathers. So that's kind of interesting. And the reason I do is because of archaeology, and it's secondary. It's a secondary witness and whatnot. It's because I'm not an expert in archaeology. So, but it's interesting that my theory about this, about how Genesis was composed, about the documents that were originally, the Genesis documents that were originally used, that Moses edited or redacted, I believe are eyewitness accounts. So,
And
that's
you ever
encountered? Have you ever encountered that theory? Most people don't know about it.
I've heard a lot of apologetics for it. I mean, but at the end of the day, I don't know of any evidence Moses existed as a historical individual. Like,
okay, sure. Yeah.
I don't see any evidence he is that he's anything outside of a mythical figure. Sure. Like someone who supposedly confronted Pharaoh, unleashed plagues, sure. Led an entire people out of Egypt, wandered for 40 years in the desert, founded a nation. There's like not one single inscription, tablet, papyrus, chronicle, or monument from Egypt, Canaan, Assyria, Babylon, or anywhere else naming Moses doing any of this stuff.
Okay, well, if you want to start at that point, that's a little bit different. You were saying earlier, what you said right before I came on was that the Bible, because you were kind of taking the Christian perspective of the Bible. What does the Bible have to do with God? Moses didn't witness creation, right? So that was kind of the point of view I was going to deal with. Because like I said, I think I disagree even with most Christians about this, not because it's a disagreement, but because I think they haven't heard the theory. So earlier you were kind of using like the presupposition that Moses did exist, and then you were saying if he did exist, he wasn't an eyewitness. So that's right. Kind of what I was interacting with. But if you want to talk about whether or not Moses existed, well then we're not talking about the Bible anymore, right? Because the Bible just says he existed, so that's evidence. But if we're going to go outside of that, do you want to talk about what does the Bible have to do with God, right? Because that's where my mind's at.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about that too. Like the Bible is a claim. Right, the sure. Bible starts off with in the beginning God created or whatever, right?
Right.
So it's sort of an assumption, I think, that ancient people would probably normally make, that there's obviously, we make tools, we make things. Obviously, there's a greater man that made me or that made the world. That seems to be one theory. Now,
one theory. Yeah, I mean, there were competing theories. I don't know. It's hard to say what the uneducated masses might have assumed, because maybe you're right. They would have assumed somebody made all this. I don't know if they would have necessarily assumed that one person made all of it, or that a person made it and it wasn't, because there were, but there were definitely educated ancients that believed that the earth was eternal, or they believed in long ages. Democritus believed in like random chance. I think Epicurus did. So if you're talking about like the Greeks and stuff like that. But then, yeah, I guess if you go over to like Babylon and those kinds, the more Middle Eastern, it does seem like they believe that there's some kind of creation. I don't know how much. I'm big into literature, so that's kind of my exposure into everything. And you encounter all this stuff when you're reading literature. I don't know how much they believe that there was a person or people, not humans, gods, that created, or that it was a part of, it was a god, like Earth itself is God, and kind of created, kind of molded itself into Earth. You know what I mean? and the universe and all that.
Hmm.
I don't know how it breaks down, but I
Right.
don't. Maybe so, maybe so. But these theories, as far as like an eternal Earth and eternal creation, all that stuff, that's all ancient. I mean, Democritus and Epicurus and all these people, that people have proposed that. People have always been able to imagine that creation was eternal. I know the church fathers spent a lot of time arguing that against the educated pagan philosophers against that point, and they always said, because we have scripture, we have what God told us. That's what they always said. That was their argument. And you need that. You can't, if you don't have an outside witness, like you said, then you just assume things have been going on. Especially if you're educated, you often assume that things are going on the same way for all eternity, and there's never been a change. The laws of physics have always applied. You know what I mean? So,
Well, I mean, like for me,
Mhm.
I used to be a God believer, and I don't have a problem with if God were true, or if
Mhm.
God actually existed. It's actually it could be a cogent theory. I mean, I don't see it's any different than saying that we emerged from a multiverse or emerged from this and that or whatever, these sort of things.
I mean, it probably comes down to what you think God is, because if you think of God
Yeah,
as the foundation of like God is truth, God is existence, God is being, well, then it's a logical problem. How do you have existence without? It's like Platonic forms. The existence as a form. You know what I mean?
right. And then we have different frameworks for approaching the question that we can explore.
Sure.
Like for me, my epistemology always starts with, kind of like I think, therefore I am, or I'd rather say I
Sure.
experience, therefore I exist, because I'm experiencing an existence, right? But that's as far as I can go, as far as really some sort of high certainty or something I can claim that I know absolutely, which I do. I think that I can say the one thing I can't doubt is that I exist, because even doubting presupposes that I exist. So
Right.
I've got to exist. Now, everything after that is an inference.
Right.
And one
Sure.
thing we know about inferences is that we can be wrong. We're always questioning, we're always doing science, history, revisions,
Yeah.
paradigm shifting. Even in our own personal life, we're growing as people, we're evolving, we're changing our worldviews. We're going through all of this stuff
Right.
because we know that our inferences can be mistaken. And especially when it comes to things like metaphysics, which are things outside of I think, therefore I am, things that are sort of outside of bigger questions. These sort of things are what we assume, or they're frameworks that we base worldviews on and things like that. And one thing I've kind of come to realize through my own life journey is that one of the things that really hurts us just personally is when we take our inferences way too serious, when we start to approach these things without humility, and we start trying to dogmatically, not just towards ourselves, but even towards others,
Oh, sure.
these sort of inferences and beliefs and metaphysical pronouncements, as though we have some access to reality, the greater reality. No, we don't. The only thing we really have access to is that we're existing in a reality. And so while it's fun to sort of ponder these sort of questions and everything like that, I think it can be very dangerous when we start to think that confuse our beliefs. And even the whole idea behind belief is kind of dangerous for me too. It leads to a lot of what I would call suffering. It can lead to cognitive dissonance. It can lead to a lot of dogmatism in societies and cultures, and it just leads to a lot of unrealistic shit. And I'm just not down with that right now in my life. Right now, I'm more about detaching from beliefs, not getting caught up in beliefs at all. Like just saying, you know what, I don't know, and I'm good with that. And I put more stock in my own experience, and even that you can question. Even that you should be skeptical about to be a healthy person, just psychologically.
Right. No, I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, I'm Catholic, and we have dogma, which is things you have to believe in order to be a Catholic. So it's kind of like, well, I'm here, so it's good to know what the requirements are. Um, and but I will tell you that, especially once I got online, started interacting with atheists and whatnot, especially in the field of economics. But people always bring that up. But is I have learned that I think it's very specific to our dynamic. I think that this time in history, with an American empire and English being the lingua franca of the world, I think that I agree with your approach, basically because I think English is so malleable that it's not like these intellectuals. It's not like Greek or Latin or Hebrew, which Hebrew is degraded in many ways. It's not like those languages where you have this very precise, unchanging meaning to metaphysical abstract concepts where everyone can align themselves and then argue and debate, be like, well, this is what you think, this is what I think. In English, I've done a lot of debates. It's usually one on definition. It's like you have to explain every little word. It's such an artsy language that's always moving and changing. And so the problem is like, okay, if I'm trying to understand you and you're trying to understand me, one of the worst things I can do is come in there and be like, I definitely know what I think, and I definitely know what you think. And well, we both think in English. So even if what we think doesn't change, the way of expressing it is going to change for a fact. So I'm amazed at the things atheists are right about. And one of the things, especially economics, one of the things that I'm very frustrated with, that I spend most of my time dealing with, is my own people and what they think they know that they're totally wrong about, and it is hurting people. It's the worst things in the world, because as a Catholic, the Catholic Church actually teaches all grace comes from the Catholic Church. So it basically says everything good that enters the world comes through the Catholic Church. Now, you have to unpack that. I'm sure everyone would disagree with that, but it's because of English. There's a lot of other things going on there, because the angels and all these things you can't see are a part of the Catholic Church. So, it's more complex than it sounds. But point being that if there's something evil in the world, it's because the Catholics messed up. They messed up. So you really can't hold anybody outside the church responsible, because it started in the church. It always does. The world follows the church, Now that might be kind of too much to bring up with somebody. But
Well, it's commendable that you can sort of see both sides and see a lot of things, and that's really commendable on your part. And that's really what, where we definitely want to start, is to say, like, even me as an unbeliever, I always want to be open to things, but also want to be honest and genuine.
yeah,
So if, depending on how a person presents a belief system to me, I would have to do an internal critique rather than an external critique, right?
right.
Because I have to sort of, well, it's easy to debunk shit from the outside, because they're not basing it on your framework. They're basing on another framework.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
have to go within that framework and test it and see, well, even among the first step, even within your framework, is there a problem? And
Can I give you an
yeah,
example that might
sure,
be interesting?
sure,
I went on Talk Heathen. Do you know Talk Heathen?
yes,
And I called in, and I had an interaction with them, and I showed it to some atheist friends of mine, Pierce Watkins. I don't know if I got a chance to show it to Objective Morality, but some others. And they said that they kind of didn't like the way I was treated on Talk Heathen, because basically it unfolded like this. We had an interaction. We were talking about women and submission and obedience and these kinds of things that are hot topics. And I was very nice, and they couldn't get me to like get into a conflict with them. So then they brought up sexual abuse in the church, and they were kind of mean at that point. They were holding me responsible for things that have very little to do with me. But I sat and I thought about that afterwards, and I didn't like how they treated. I don't really want to talk to him again, but because it was underhanded. But I really did think about it, and I released something later, and I was like, you know what? The church is abusive. The church on earth. This is where it's important to understand. Like the church militant, which is always dying. People are dying, passing away, a new generation's coming constantly. It's like if you picture the church as a body, Holy Mother Church, the church militant on earth is like skin flakes. It's coming and going so quickly. The Pope dies, new Pope. Now, it's not to say those things, it's not extremely important. Obviously it is. But most of the church is the Blessed Mother in heaven. That's like over 50% of the church. So if that makes any sense. But point being, on earth, the church is abusive. It's abused me. It's neglected me. And it's like, well, if I accept that, because and I can give you an example of how it's done that, but if I accept that that's true, well, how do I respond to it? Well, I also accept all these other things. I accept that the church is the true church, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church with its head in Rome, with the Pope. And it's Holy Mother Church, which is a spiritual reality that I understand my relationship to it. Well, what do you do? And it's also the body and all these kinds of things. What do you do with an abusive, neglectful mother? Well, what I would do is I would not listen to what she's telling me, or at least take it with a grain of salt. And, there are some things I definitely have to accept that, obviously what the church requires, it's not to overcomplicate. I'm not necessarily going to take everything she tells me to heart, and I'm going to provide and take care of her. And I will take care of her and provide for my mother. And this is very important, because I was talking to a Muslim about this, and she was like, well, do you admit that the Catholic Church has submitted to the liberal order? And I said, well, it's complicated. But I said, thing is, I am the church. I'm a part of the body. So if the toe does something, the body has done it. You know what I mean? If I kick you and my toe hits you, I have kicked you. If the head does something, the body has done it. So point being, if I'm faithful and I'm good and virtuous, then the church is. You know what I mean? And so the more that people complain about the Catholic Church, the more firmly I become Catholic, because it doesn't contradict any of the truths that I've been taught about the Catholic Church. And the more I have to act virtuously. Not just virtuously, but aggressively virtuously. I have to go and find people and try to be virtuous in front of them. You know what I mean? So
you want to make change from the inside.
Exactly. When I was Protestant, Protestants in America hate the Catholic Church. They think it's Satan. I was considering converting, and I did. And they were saying, well, don't you understand the Pope is the Antichrist? And I said, well, the reason I'm going to convert is because the Pope is the Antichrist. I don't believe that anymore. But what I was explaining to people is I said, okay, so if you're at a chessboard, because I believe in the devil, I believe in evil. If you're on a chessboard, if you're playing chess and your enemy's always moving towards a certain direction, you might not know what he's up to, but you can tell what he's aiming at. And that's where you need to move your forces. You know what I mean? And so that's why I became Catholic.
And
I probably got to go. So, but you ask me, because my son's trying to talk to me. I didn't mean to hog the thing. What's on your mind?
It's all good, man.
I'll respond, then I got to go.
Yeah, I was just curious, and I say this even as being a believer at one time, but I don't want to project my own, motivations on anyone else. But I'm just thinking, what motivates you to believe in anything like that? Like anything like the devil, God, the church, whether it be Protestant, Catholic, what have you. What do you think is your prime motivation?
That's an unfortunately complex question, only because I'm 30 years old. So I've had 30 years of motivations, and over time, my intellect has been adapted to what I've gained. The motivation has gained the knowledge. My intellect has adapted it. So if you ask me why I converted, that's one thing. If you ask me why I started reading the Bible, it's a different thing. Why I started praying, different thing. Um, but if I say, well, what motivates me to remain Catholic? It's because I sincerely believe, and we could talk about where this belief comes from, but I do sincerely believe that there is heaven, and and earth sucks. I hate it. I hate earth. I hate the world, and I want to go to heaven, and that's the only way for me to go.
Why do you hate the earth?
Because of the suffering, because of the evil, because of the fact, just all the things I see. It's horrible. I can't. When I thought this was my only place to be ever, it was so illogical and wrong that it made me suicidal as a young child. I was like, what's the point of this life?
What do you your view of God? Would you say God is all knowing, all loving, and all powerful?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Wait,
So
all
why
loving.
would
Really,
God?
all loving I'm iffy about, but go ahead.
So if God is all knowing and all powerful, and He doesn't like, I assume that you believe God doesn't like sin, suffering, and bad
Right.
behavior.
Right. Yeah.
If He knew all of this stuff from the beginning, because He's all knowing, then why does this evil world begin to begin with?
And this is probably one of the disagreements between me and God that I'm working on. Because I understand that I need to agree with God wholeheartedly in order to go to heaven. I would not. So he decided clearly that this was all worth it, you know, and his reason, and it's hard to understand this, is basically that the people in heaven, the people who make it to heaven, them being there and what they will gain from being there, if we call it a place, is worth all the suffering. All the people, there's many more people in hell than in heaven, and all the people in hell is a worthy sacrifice for people going to heaven. That's literally how he thought. And it's hard for me because it's like I wouldn't have been born if Adam hadn't sinned. You know what I mean? Most likely. I mean, he could have arranged it and all that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, that I naturally disagree with that. I think we should have just been born, gone to heaven. And that seemed to be
Yeah,
his
but
first plan, by
the
the way.
angel-
When he originally made Adam, that seemed to be the original arrangement. And I don't know why he allowed this sort of sin. I know the theology behind it and everything like that, but if we're talking like my actual way of approaching the world, it's pretty hard for me to comprehend.
Well, you're no different than a lot of people, including myself, when I was
Yeah.
also a Christian. And one of the things that I observe is that you're attempting to believe something that you don't understand. You have,
Sure.
like you said,
Oh
you
yeah,
have,
definitely.
you have a disagreement with God, something you don't understand, and yet you believe it. So then you have to
Well,
ask yourself, what is the motivation behind going ahead and saying, you know what, I don't understand this, but you know what, I believe anyways? I mean, really
well,
think to yourself.
if we're going to talk about belief, the belief we're talking about there is that he arranged this. So, and that's just from observation. It's like I observe the evil, I observe the good. It doesn't take that much intellect. It takes an intellect, but it doesn't take that much intellectual work to separate these two and say there's probably a possibility where everything is evil. What would that look like? There's probably a possibility where everything is good and there is no evil, and what would that look like? And it's like, well, this is what I call God. God good, this is goodness itself. And so that's, you know what I mean? So it's just observation. So this exists, at least in my intellect, I can picture it. Goodness only. I mean, I can't picture all its details, but no evil, only good.
Conceive of it.
And then, yeah, so then the belief is like, okay, and then you have to there's some other things like what comes first, what created what, the equal is one above the other, that kind of stuff. But I have, for different logical reasons, believe that good is powerful and evil is weak. You know what I mean? So good is what created evil, and basically, therefore, so if good created evil, so yeah, so then the belief is he did that. Why? Then it's like I have no idea why, but I can observe that that happened through those logical steps.
See, for me, this sort of wrestling that you're going through is something that I went through years and years and years to where I couldn't take it anymore.
Oh, sure.
Because,
I believe it.
It's gonna depending on how seriously you take it, like depends on how it affects you, like how when, like, especially when it becomes more personal. Like, it's one thing to turn on the news and see the violence in the world, or see the hurricane kill the people, or whatever that is.
Yeah, but to know the guy responsible and be able to talk to him is a completely different thing.
Yeah, but when you deal with it personally in your own life, when you have a child that you love,
yeah,
and they're taken for no good reason,
yep,
or these things tend to make it more on the forefront.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
then, and a lot of this stuff it's easy to kind of just gloss over it. Like, it's more of an intellectual sort of exercise to say, oh, the problem of evil. Okay. But at the end of the day, though, we're not here. We didn't come from nothing. There has to be an explanation.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to opt out for it. But until it touches you personally, then it's not going to be so easy to gloss over.
Yeah.
And so maybe what I would invite you to do, just as your own exercise of your own freedom, is to kind of look at other models. And maybe you are familiar with other models of explanation for different things, right? Like, like there's cognitive and psychological theories that explain God belief, right?
Oh, sure. Yep.
And there's theory of mind extension.
Yeah, I think Freud was one of the most famous ones.
Yeah, there apophenia, pattern seeking.
Okay. Interesting.
And a lot of this stuff is based in minimizing existential anxiety. Like, why do we die? Why do bad things happen? What happens?
Oh, yeah. Well, it definitely minimizes that.
Yeah, like those things
I had a lot of
motivate.
Yeah.
They may motivate you, and you're not even aware, because I always say this. Like me myself, I'm a non-dualist. I lean towards an idealistic sort of worldview. But one of the things that is entailed in my understanding of my own self is how the human mind is so limiting. Its number one primary directive is to kind of fool you. And we have this hyper agency detection sort of natural inclination. We want to feel like there's a greater mind, where someone's with us in our corner. We're not by ourselves. We're social animals.
Right.
So obviously we're going to look at things like gods and spirits and ghosts and these sort of things as comfort, sort of like comforting explanations for why things are the way they are.
Right.
But if we can get over that, if we can entertain that possibility, that model as just a possibility, then we can sort of explore ways to sort of transcend all that. And I guarantee you, man, if you do that and you start looking at things through a different lens, just a little tweak in your worldview, it's going to open up an entire different reality for you. And these sort of things, these sort of problem of evil questions will never come back and haunt you, because these things will, at some point in your life. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen to you, Nathaniel. Eventually something really horrible is going to happen to all of us.
Right.
And at that point, we're either going to rest on our ego, or we're going to have to run to our beliefs or something like that. And it's never, ever going to fix it. It's never, ever going to do that trick for you.
Well, Okay, I'll just tell you this, and then I'll bounce.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
let's see. Today's the 15th of January, and so it would have been, I believe, late October 2024. My son died, and when he did, I went to church. I did run to my beliefs, and I even said to God, you know, I don't know why you'd allow this, but I submit to you. You know, you're wise and wiser than me and whatnot. So I did exactly what you're saying, and I will tell you that the fruit that has come from that act of humility and submission towards God um, has been the most fruitful. Everything I've done since then has been motivated by that. So, but anyway, so I have experienced that. All I'm trying.
Gotcha. I get that. I respect that.
Cool. Well, and we can get to know each other better. This is fun. I'm glad I was able to jump
Yeah,
in.
man. Thank you
We
so
gotta
much
talk
for
more.
coming on and chatting with
God
me.
bless you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. And I appreciate you, man, for coming on and
Keep
sharing
up the
your
good work.
story there too. That I know that's not easy to share, by the way.
I mean, I feel bad, like I'm bragging or something. So everyone's like, "Oh, this bad thing happened to me. This bad thing happened to me. That's why I'm better than you." I don't know. It's
no,
just I only bring it up if people touch on the subject. You know what I mean?
yeah, I get it. I get it. And that's something worth thinking about, because on the other hand, I see a utility in beliefs too, though. Like
Yeah.
I do see the utilities in it. And
Very useful. That's correct.
yeah. And like I say, it depends on
I
the
agree
moral.
with everything you're saying. It's like
Mhm.
comfort. Existential anxiety is what I struggled with as a child. You know, constantly. The utility of belief was why I started praying. I started praying as an atheist because it was useful. Dale Carnegie told me that. So there's nothing I've disagreed with that you've said, really.
Yeah.
So like, yeah,
That's
so
what we're gonna do, man. That's what I'm here for. That's what my community's for, is so we can talk, believers, unbelievers,
no,
of anything, politics, religion, whatever it is, because I really think that, as a society, we're now more than ever stuck in our echo chambers and
oh
bubbles,
yeah,
and it's
Sure.
so much more productive when we can actually talk to each other instead of at each other,
Yeah, and
even
people
as
hate
an
each other.
atheist to a
Yeah,
believer.
people
We
totally hate
need,
each other. It's crazy.
yeah, we don't hate you. We are all the same, man. You are me and I am you.
Oh
You know,
yeah, I mean, I can't be a Marxist. I can't be a communist, but I more and more think that it's like a few rich people that nobody knows that's causing all the trouble.
yeah,
And like all the normal guys, they're just trying to make some money on YouTube are fine. There's nothing, I mean, yeah, you know, it's nice not to insult my religion, but you know, I almost don't even blame you because it's like, look at how bad it's been, you know, and what the church is supposed to stop this kind of stuff. So,
and
all right.
look, those call-in shows,
Yeah,
maybe
that's their
stay away
business
from them.
model. I knew
They're
what I
trying
was
to
getting
make money.
into.
It's entertainment, so just keep that in mind.
I
But a
get
show
it.
like this
I
one,
get
we're going to be open with you. So
I'm just a little sensitive, but I'm glad.
yeah.
I'm glad to be. Yeah, it was good talking to you. I'll have to come. I will come back soon. God bless you.
Okay, Nathaniel, thank you so much, man.
Thank you. And if you got like my information or something, and you remind me, I'm sure I'm subscribed, but I'm so busy and there's so many notifications that I know your show's on Saturday, but I'll try to make it. What time
Yeah,
is
try
it?
to
On
make
Saturday?
it, man.
What time is it? on Saturday?
12 Central Time, Central Standard,
Okay.
right at
do you?
noon.
How
Yeah,
long
we
do you-
usually go on for whatever, like sometimes as much as 3 hours.
Okay. I will.
So it's
I
a
will.
good window. Yeah.
I'm going to put that in my calendar. It's nap time for the children, so it's always a gambit. You know,
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen? Well, God bless
There
you.
you
I'll
go.
see you later, man.
Thank you, man. God bless you,
Thank
brother.
you. Pray for me.
All right. Yeah, man. We like to conversate and build bridges, man. And it ain't about the hate and everything like that, but it's always about trying to lift each other up and promote positivity in so many different ways. And that's really nice, man. But look, I am running a little bit over than what I had planned to do this, because I got to go out and do my thing and try to make ends meet. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here, man. But thank you everyone for participating, watching the show, listening to my rants and everything like that. And until next time, man, we are out.